All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 18th episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we help empower tomorrow's leaders through sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronpour, and my special guest today is Brian Kelly of Human Factors Consulting. I will let Brian introduce himself shortly and then jump into the questions and topics to discuss. But before I do that, I just wanted to take this time and thank Brian for joining me today. I know you've got a crazy busy schedule, and I really appreciate you being on this podcast with me today, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Rob. Glad to be here with you.
Awesome. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into some of the topics.
Sure, Brian Kelly. I'm from Northern Virginia in the DC area, and I work with Human Factors Consulting, helping grow people's relationship with the human factors that accelerate better performance, healthier relationships, and greater fulfillment in life. Because in my journey, both in corporate and then working for myself in as a leadership and executive coach and people development, team development, the factor that I saw happening consistently was no matter what the presenting issue was or what the goal was, it always came back to growing people's relationship with the human factor. So be it fear, control, empathy, curiosity, courage. There's so many of them. And so really the key part of the whole thing is identifying what is getting in your way or what could enable you to get where you want to go, if you would kind of just shift kind of how you're looking at things and embrace the discomfort that likely comes with growth and change and step into it with curiosity and courage. And so that's sort of the journey we're on with our clients and with ourselves. It's a constant journey for me as well, right? Growing my relationship.
That's
That's what
right.
life is a constant learning journey, right, Rob?
That's it. That's exactly what it is. So, Brian, why did you get interested in this, and how did you come up with the human factor and that it's a great niche, by the way, and it's 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 great from what you've explained to me. I just want to know what drew you into that part.
So coming from corporate, I kind of went into coaching, got certified as a leadership and executive coach at Georgetown, and went through the process of the learning and growth there in terms of serving clients. And from actually my entire life, if I look back, when I started reflecting back on my life in corporate, my life as a human being from early childhood up until now, my experiences with clients, the common thread that kept coming up was because we're all on a growth journey, but what does that mean for everybody? It's different for everybody. But the
Mhm.
common thread was what needed to grow and change was something within you often to
Mhm.
get to where you wanted to go. And it was typically a human factor. So the curiosity became about what do you need or what is getting in your way. And often that was, in fact, pretty much every time it was, what is my relationship with fear or control or vulnerability in my case. And so that kind of activated it in 2013 when I was at Georgetown, when I was going through my process of like, do I really want to be a coach? Am I just going through this for a reason that's really just transactional, or does it something that really meant something to me? And I knew it was the latter. And so going through my process, I had to kind of go through a deep dive with myself and ask myself questions about, hey, what's getting in the way? Because I was struggling going through the process and applying what was being taught in the program. And what I learned was what was getting in my way of being who I knew I could be and who I wanted to be was my relationship with vulnerability. Because my
Mhm.
learned belief was vulnerability meant weakness, right? And so coming through life with that lens presents certain challenges, both personally and professionally. And how was I going to be able to engage authentically with clients, with myself, with people in my personal life, if I had an unhealthy relationship with vulnerability? And that was the case. So I kind of went through a process where I reframed that to a healthier version of my relationship with vulnerability. And what I came up with, it wasn't until so I could get through the program and that transactional nature of it, that would be essentially meaningless. What I came up with that meant something to me and something that I could kind of put as a foundation for my springboard forward was vulnerability is human. It's what connects us.
That's
And it's
right.
actually a strength. Much, we've been kind of conditioned otherwise, but it's actually a strength. And so when people kind of understand that and are able to step into their relationship with, whether it's vulnerability, fear, courage, whatever uh, emotion, behavior, or human relationship way of being better serves them, worlds open up. And I tell this story all the time about, after I had uh, my epiphany, if you want to call it that, in May of 2013. We went back for the last set of classes in the middle of June. And for the first day, I went up to the second floor, got off the elevator, and two classmates stopped me separately. And it's about 100 feet from the elevator to the classroom. They stopped me separately and said exactly the same thing. They said, "You look lighter." And they weren't talking about my weight. They could see a whole new manifestation and way of being in me. And I was like, that's great. I appreciate the validation, that, though I didn't feel I needed, although I appreciated the congruency of how I felt versus how others saw me, because that wasn't always the case. And so eventually, over the course of the next decade, the experiences reinforced that. And I'm like, what if I could do that for other people and be part of that journey for other people and help us create better together? How cool would that be? And that's really
Nice.
the journey we're on now.
Better together. I love that, Brian. So you talk about vulnerability and you talk about, it's a strength versus a weakness, which I absolutely agree with. And I've kind of experienced that in my journey as well. What story do you share w- about yourself that you've been through that people can kind of resonate when it resonates with people when you're coaching them or when you're trying to inspire someone?
Yeah. And so I still remember the feeling of being in self-protective mode, right? So the Georgetown story is the story I tell because I came in, I knew five people who had been through the program from my employer. They were giving me kind of guidance on this is what it's going to be like. You're going to need to bring real issues because you're going to do triad coaching where you're going to coach each other and you got to bring practical, real issues. I'm like, sure, I'll play. But the voice in the back of my head said, yeah, but I'm going to control what that looks like. Don't worry, Brian, I'm not going to let them do that to you, kind of thing. And so I was in a self-protective mode and I was going through the program. Isn't it interesting? Like that, right? Oh, I'll step in and play and do what they're asking me to do, but only to the level I'm comfortable at. And that's where it got, because then we had a part of the program was they had a supervisor listening to your recorded call. And then, so she asked me with curiosity and judgment, like, what's going on with you? Because we knew each other. And she was trying to get at what was going on and it's in a way to trying to help me. And I knew something was getting in my way, but I didn't really know what it was at that point. This was probably April-ish, right? And
Mhm.
then we came out of that and, she had some guidance there. And what I knew I really needed to do is get to my why. Why am I doing this? Is it just like uh, something, a fad in the moment, something I'm curious about? Do I really want to do it? And if so, what is really getting in the way of me being me and showing up as me? Not just some of the time, because I'd seen that throughout my life. I'd show up as me sometimes. And then when I felt a little insecure or something, I went back into that mode, just to, the self-protective mode. And that's when I went into that. It was like a week-long deep dive process in May, and uh, it was transformational because what it did is it helped me grow my relationship with myself, right?
Mhm.
Self-love, self-acceptance. I am good enough. All the questions my clients would come up with in terms of how they might see themselves. Um, because everything that I had believed was based on something that was a fallacy and that was something that came externally or was demonstrated and reinforced externally, but was never something I believed. But I just believed it because that's what was reinforced and that's what I was conditioned to. And I was like, wait a minute. When I looked at the leaders that were the best leaders that I had either had and worked with or saw, the thing I noticed about them, it was their willingness to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
I've got it wrong. Curiosity, what do you think, right? Not having to have all the answers. All the things that we see sometimes show up when leaders are struggling a little bit. I'm like, yeah, but this isn't true. I see different here. And you know what? This. This is who I am. This is what I believe. And so I had to unlearn what I learned and um, and learn anew and kind of what is the version of Brian with his chosen beliefs versus his learned beliefs. And that's typically the journey people are on, is everybody's got their where they are now and their learned beliefs and their conditions that they conditioning that they've had up until now. And it's not good or bad, it just is, right? So no judgment. But
That's right.
what if you were living your life more aligned and honoring what you believed? And so now we have those kind of discussions to get to, well, I don't really believe that, or I feel like I'm good enough, but I just I feel incongruent in some way. And how do I get to a place where I can be that person? Maybe not all the time. That would be an optimal goal towards the end, but most of the
Yes,
time,
that's
because
right.
it's still going to be struggle, right? You're not going to, like, I haven't conquered vulnerability, and I'm never going to, but I have changed my relationship with it. And now I have tools to help myself kind of, when I know feel myself kind of becoming vulnerable, like, acknowledge and accept and then release, right? Okay, how do I want to be now, right? I give myself choices. And that's what came up, is the possibilities and choices with being who you are and embracing that. And that's something that many folks, and that's the human nature of it, are struggling with, right? In terms of bringing their voice, and like, my voice matters and I matter. And the truth is, you do, and your voice does matter. So how do
That's
we
right.
get to that point with everybody?
Good. Awesome. So you mentioned something interesting, Brian. You mentioned the fact to unlearn and learn something. And, I was watching something and I saw one of your posts talk about the power of unleading. Is that kind of allude to that, or?
Yeah, and so power of unlearning. Yeah, and I was part of a co-author of a book called "The Longing: Stories of Courage and Vulnerability," and my chapter
Hmm.
was on unlearning, and I talk about learned beliefs, right? So when we're coming into the world, we're dependent on everybody for everything, not just food, but like survival, and
Yes.
up until early mid childhood, and then we start kind of forming our own observations, opinions, and whatnot. And so everything we kind of learn is external. And that's when we go through the teenage stage. We question everything. Wait, I don't know about that. I don't, maybe you're not right. Maybe I am right. That kind of healthy, kind of challenging. But do we ever relinquish the learned beliefs and challenge them to the point where we start to own and choose our beliefs? And so my process of unlearning, with the vulnerability story, is really a story of unlearning. I talk in the book, my chapter, about so growing up, and everybody's like, well, just be nice. And I'm like, I never knew what the hell that meant. Because if you told me, Rob, you might have a different definition than my mom or my grandfather or my coach. And I'm like, what does that mean? Do you mean be kind? And like, why wouldn't I? Like, my thought was, why do you have to tell me to do that? And it was more about their insecurities, about me doing something behaviorally that was going to embarrass them or something like that, and that's the control mechanism. Understandable with young kids, right? You want to make sure that they understand that now is the time to behave, kind of thing. But it was just something like that, and I'm like, whenever someone would tell me to be nice, I always had this visceral reaction inside. But as a kid, I couldn't understand what that meant, much less address it in terms of what does that mean. But looking back on it now, I did this LinkedIn article too about being nice versus being kind, and
Mm.
it's like, most people mean be kind, and that I can relate to. I'll be kind, but when you say be nice, what do you mean? Your definition of nice? Do you mean my coach's definition of nice? Do you mean my grandfather's definition of nice? Because it all felt different there. And so the unlearning process gets back to your values, right? What do you
Mhm.
value? Who are you, right? It asks those deeper questions. So that's why the deep dive was that really deep. It was with tears and all that kind of thing, because I had to challenge some, held beliefs about myself. And we go through that process. And this isn't like an easy process, right? So when we work together, I create the conditions for people to feel comfortable with me, because it's something that people are going to have to open up. And if I can't be genuine and authentic in creating those conditions and honoring the space and making people choose to step into that space, they're not going to kind of bring out what needs to come out. So we can go through the process of identifying what would you like to be the case, and how do
That's
we
right.
get from A to B, which is usually going to be letting go and an unlearning process of some sort to grow your relationship with whatever that is that's getting in the way, or that's missing from what's going to make you a better version of yourself.
So I love that, and I've experienced this throughout my coaching sessions with my clients as well. Brian, when I take on clients to kind of coach them on leadership, where it turns into mostly mindset. And one thing I disclosed at the beginning is I'm not your psychiatrist or your psychologist, but I do look for those deep rooted causes. And my philosophy is if you don't fix that, you're just putting a band-aid and it's going to reappear again. So what's your take on that, Brian, in terms of it absolutely has to do with the vulnerability. So if they're not honest or they can't become vulnerable, you'll never be able to fix those deep-rooted issues that lie within themselves. And it has to do with the fear, insecurities, and all that stuff that comes out. And now you're reflecting that onto people that you're leading, managing, or supervising, whatever that capacity you're at. What are your thoughts on that? With respect to leadership coaching and kind of being somebody's, I don't want to say psychiatrist, but doing that deep dive there.
Yeah, so just from a language perspective, I don't fix anybody. We
Yeah,
address these issues. So getting to the issues
that's
that are
right.
at the core and the root of it, and then addressing them is important, right? So until I got to the root of vulnerability was getting in my way, I wasn't going to be able to grow in the way that I wanted to, needed to, not just for work, not just for as a leader, not just in my working with clients as a coach, but personally in my relationships with people, right? Um, and so getting to identify what is at the root of what's what your issue is, whether or your concern is, right? Whether it's public speaking, whether it's leadership, whatever that is, um, usually fear-based to start off
Hmm.
with some form, whether it's judgment or fear-based. And so, and there's no judgment. Okay, that's where you are. How so then it gets to, well, where do you want to be, and then how important is that to you? And you start to build a way to get from A to B by where do I start, right? I have, and then the language is important for me, right? So it's, I have
Yeah,
an unhealthy relationship with vulnerability is different for me than I have an issue with vulnerability I need to fix, right? And so that makes me wrong or flawed or like broken in some way. And so that's why with clients, for me, it's important to kind of say, well, is it healthy or unhealthy for you, right? Oh, it's unhealthy. Okay, we all have those kind of relationships with things that may be unhealthy for us. What's important about having a healthy relationship? Well, my relationship with my family will be better. My relationship with my colleagues, my manager, um, my ability to show up authentically and not feel worried about being judged. Um, it allows me to be a stronger version of myself, more bolder version of myself, instead
that's
of
right.
playing smaller. And so that I think is the issue with, until you address what's getting in the way, you're always going to be playing smaller than the person that could actually be showing up in your work in your professional life. And that doesn't serve anybody. And
That's right.
least of all you, right?
No, that's great. And just a segue into the next topic is, this is something that's very close to me is mental health. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're seeing a lot more mental health issues out there than there was previously. And, it's become a topic where actually more people are starting to talk about it. There is a stigma around the whole thing. And, us as leaders, we're trying to help people out and help people again, like you said, address those concerns. What are you seeing in terms of mental health and leaders, and what do we need to do?
So I'm glad you asked this question. I'm probably going to give you an answer you weren't anticipating. I'm going to give you my story because I had an issue with mental health, right?
Awesome.
And so, I had to stop some things for a while so I could get kind of um, to a place where I was healthy. My own mental health had improved, and so it was December of, I think it was 2021, a couple during the pandemic, right? Um, and I knew something was off with me. I had enough self awareness to know something was off, and I wanted to get checked. So I went to my doctor. They have a basic like a depression anxiety test, and I was like very mild. It wasn't an issue at the time, but I wanted to get a baseline because I knew I felt different. Fast forward a couple of months, and I got worse, right? Because there's different things going on with family and life, um, and my anxiety score went up,
Hmm.
and um, so that took a lot of my physical and mental energy to focus on myself and my health. Just like if I had a broken leg or an ankle or a physical ailment, um, and think about it doing the work we do. If you have, I'll say, compromised mental health,
Yes.
how are you going to be able to be in a position to best serve yourself and others? And so I was off LinkedIn for a while. People hadn't heard from me, and the reason for that is I had to choose myself at that point. And that's the thing that I think we as leaders and employers, and even just anybody that may be going through mental health, is there's nothing wrong. In fact, I encourage you to identify your needs and attend to them and ask for help. And that's what I think is most people are fearful of and won't do because of the stigma that you mentioned, is ask for help.
Yes.
And nothing can change unless we do, because I didn't have the resources to help myself. I had to ask, for help from my doctor. And then, I got some medication. It turns out that it was really just some kind of a chemical thing that I had to get balanced. It was imbalanced. And now the recovery is something that happened, I won't say quickly, but I got to where I needed to be. But I haven't come off the medication because it still keeps me in balance. And so am I ashamed of it? No, no. I wish I had found out about it sooner, right? And
Exactly.
and I'll address another topic within the space too, is men, right? So men in particular,
Yes.
speaking up and owning that they have a mental health condition or something that they're dealing with, and they don't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable or broken, or that they can't do their job, or or to be judged. And understandable. But how is not asking for help helping you, right?
Hmm.
How are you going to get better unless you make, kind of take that band-aid off and go ask for the help and step into that courage and grow your relationship with vulnerability, and grow your relationship with the human factors. And so I had to practice what I preached, Rob.
Yes.
So tell me about what are you seeing in mental health? Nothing tells you, gives you the reality more than actually practicing, what you preach in this case. And
Yeah.
so I was helping someone else through their mental health challenges, and it was a toxic workplace and other things that were going on in their life. And I, in turn, kind of that ended up triggering me in some way. But realizing that I needed help too, and it's not just, oh, I'm a coach, I should not have mental health issues because humanize Brian. He's a coach, or he's a professional that deals with people in some way, so he should never have mental health issues because. And it's like, it's sort of what we do in the workplace, is we dehumanize people. It's like we're robotic. It's like, no, we're not. And
Yes.
it brings back the reality of it. And the reality is that it's an epidemic right now. It's happening at all levels, and the most concerning piece is it's happening with kids.
Yes.
And so if we as adults don't deal with it, or teach our children how to deal with it and encourage them to ask for help, how are we making the next generation, making it better for the next generation, and encouraging and building the tools within kids to say it's okay if I need help. It's okay for me to ask for help. Um, and that's the most disconcerting thing, is you see all the statistics about kids in schools, and drug use, and um, other even more horrific things that are happening because of mental health concerns. And to disregard it or not prioritize it as much, if not more, than physical health, and honor it, it's irresponsible.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I think you nailed it with the word courage. I think having that courage to come out and seek help is the easiest thing that you can do. And the other thing, as a leader, you lead by example. So if you're bottling all that stuff inside you, what do you think is going to happen down the road? You're just going to implode or explode, and it just doesn't do you any good. And we need to talk about it We need people to come out and to share their experiences and stories like you are. And that's how it resonates with the rest of the folks to say, hey, I'm just like this person and I can come to, I can go seek help too. So I think that's a great story to share. And thank you for doing that, Brian.
You appreciate that, Rob. And one other thing there, just before we
Yeah.
close this topic out, I think sometimes we think if we don't share a story, then no one will find out. And what the
Hmm.
reality is, just people observe your behavior and they kind of know something's off
Yes.
with you. And so if you think you're fooling people, you're really not. And you're not being honest with yourself and you're not being honest with your people. And so how is that creating better with and for others?
Yes. However, Brian, there are folks I've seen that do a very good job masking it. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, right.
Before.
and
I love the word too, because that's what it is. You
yeah,
put your
that's
work
right.
mask on.
And one of the things you see in today's society is social media. So, I heard a couple posts on this that people will never put their negative aspect of their life on social media. You're always seeing the happy, glorious times, but in reality, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes with that person or people that are on there, and some of them are, struggling with a lot of demons inside. So again, some people have a great way of putting that mask on, but at the end of the day, it will reveal itself at one point.
Yeah, you're so right with that in terms of people can become really good at that skill.
Yes.
So there's an element of that that's kind of awesome in terms of being able to develop that kind of skill, but the impact of it isn't so great.
Yeah, and the impact on yourself, which is right.
Yes,
That's the
especially
key,
yourself. That's the
especially
thing.
yourself. Yeah,
Yeah, and then by proxy, relationships of everybody around you because of how you then show up. Because as you said, you're bottling everything up. At some point, there's an explosion that's going to happen. That's probably not
that's
going to
right.
help you or anybody else.
So,
Unfortunately, right?
yeah, someone will end up paying for that as well. So, Brian, I want to talk about improving the workplace experience. How do leaders tackle this, and how do you help accelerate the growth? Like, how do you as a leader, how do you accelerate growth, but how do you also tackle improving the workplace experience for your teams?
I think that creating a workplace environment leads to the growth, right? So
That's right.
I call it creating the conditions, right? So
Hmm.
it's sort of like a garden, right? If you don't create the conditions for your garden to be such that fruits and vegetables or whatever can grow out of it, they're not going to, right? It's like nature. It's getting back to nature, and so the same kind of thing. Um, Workplaces, uh, when you create the conditions for it being okay to fail, and
Mm,
understand the definition of failure being a stepping stone to success, rather than failure is a description of who you are. Because if you fail, then you are terrible. You suck. Whatever you want to say in terms of that, and you're not a good employee. You don't have skills. You're not valuable. And so I think it's lived values and demonstrated by leadership, and celebrated and permeated throughout the organization. And so creating the conditions for people to thrive, right? Curiosity, asking their perspective. What do you think?
mhm.
I value your perspective. I see you. Oh, I would have never thought of that. Thank you for bringing that up. All these things. Oh, Susie's quiet. She never says anything in a meeting. Well, if you're a leader, why aren't you asking her if she'd like to share her perspective? That's on
That's
you.
right.
That's not on her. Some people are quiet. Some people are more vocal. Some people want to think through their response because they're very strategic and well thought out before responding instead of just whatever comes on the top of their head. So, how about identifying and understanding your people to the point where you know how best to invite them into the conversation and to get their perspective on things,
Yeah,
because you're missing out on innovation and creativity when you fail to step up as a leader and invite others in. So if it's, oh, I want to get consensus and I want that to be my way, you may not be inclined to do that. Okay, well, guess what? Everybody's going to feel that. And eventually that's going to lead to people making other choices about where they'd like to work
that's
instead
right.
of, okay, um, you know, Rob, what do you think about this? I haven't heard your perspective on this. I'd really like to know what you had to add so that we can factor that into how we kind of make the decision on this. And if you're asking all your team members and you actually value diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, and you demonstrate it, that's the lived value, right? If you talk it and post it on the wall, people feel when that is not lived.
Yes.
And so when all that's in place and people have the energy of, wow, I'm really appreciated here, I feel like I belong,
Hmm.
I can bring my voice, guess what happens to their development, growth? Guess what happens to the relationship with each other? Better. Guess what happens to the relationship with the clients? Better. What happens to the performance of the organization? Growth, right? So it's like um, belonging is creating the conditions. How do you create belonging for everybody, right? And not just talk about it, but create the conditions for it. And so it's those kind of things in meetings. Is does everybody have a voice? An
Yes.
opportunity. I want to say everybody having a voice, meaning everybody's got a win and everything. I don't mean that. I mean, are you inviting diverse perspectives in, right,
Yes.
in meetings,
Yes.
especially those that may not always speak up? Because that does, as someone who's an introvert, that doesn't mean I like if people that know me know I'll have something to say. I may be quiet because I'm listening because I want to hear what you have to say because I value it. Plus, it'll also probably give me some ideas that I can build on and then share back. And so quiet doesn't mean I don't have anything to say. Quiet means I'm listening and I'm processing and I'm kind of formulating what I might have to say and what my perspective is on this. So be careful when you think, oh, quiet equals doesn't have anything to say.
Yes.
Um, and so that's from a leadership perspective. That's one of my big invitations for leaders is if you're not hearing from some people, you probably want to find a way to do that, even if it's in a one-on-one, and say, hey, you know, I'd really like your perspective on whatever project X and where we're going with this and how it's going to impact the company and our customers. I didn't hear you from you in the meeting, and I neglected ownership to kind of invite you into the conversation there. I wanted to circle back with you because we make, you know, not it's not like you have to be perfect every time, but realize, hey, if there's a perspective that was missing from the conversation, go seek it out, right?
That's right. That's right. So
And so
I'm
that's sort of where I come from on that perspective.
good, and I'm glad that you brought the introvert piece out. I'm going to be having a recent podcast on introverts as leaders.
Mm.
So, so that I really want to again share that perspective with people. Brian, you talked about values and living the values. I have a big issue that I've started addressing lately about these missions, visions, and values that people plump on the wall and it collects dust and nobody knows what they even mean. Sometimes it just becomes fancy words on the wall. What would your advice be to organizations in terms of putting actual values that you're going to carry out day to day? And how do you communicate that with, with your teams and with the organization on a regular basis versus just, okay, here it is, look at it whenever you want?
Yeah, so I see some values on the back of your
Well,
background there.
those are
So
just motivational stuff.
but to some extent, them being on the wall is okay, but they have to be practiced and
Yeah.
demonstrated and valued and rewarded and incented, right? And
Yes.
so it's the behavior along with the values, right? If the behavior isn't aligned, actively practiced, people notice, right? It becomes a, oh, you expect that of us, but I don't see that from you. If it's not demonstrated and people don't see it, then it doesn't become something they value because the interpretation is you don't value it. You're just saying it, right? And so from the perspective of uh, how do you communicate lived values, um, give examples of how people in the organization and celebrate people who are living it at all levels.
Mhm.
Oh, we were on this project and this person, who's a junior analyst of, whatever kind of, and just they came up with this idea of how to kind of save us $100,000 on this project. And what they did is they kind of raised their hand and shared their voice and perspective based on something they had thought about or done in a different company and wanted to bring that knowledge in. When we don't invite other perspectives, like we hire for a lawyer, accountant, a
Yes.
tech lead, right? And we hire for that job, right? What we miss is all of the person beyond that
Yes.
that could be bringing contribution to the company and
Yes.
the customer, right? And so, how do you create the culture? Value the person. Yes, they are doing X job for you. Yes, you're hiring them and paying X dollars to this. That's transactional, right? If you want transformation, value the person. So are you having Uh, are you connecting with people? How are you connecting with people? Do you care about them outside the job? Do they feel like you care with them outside the job? Or if they're sick, or if they need to run home for a sick child, are you chastising them for not finishing the project and prioritizing the project, and instead of caring for their family? Do you have a plan as a manager and leader for a backup? And yes, sometimes it's difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. Oh, it's the last minute and something happens because we can't control when life gets in the way or life comes up. But either is it like brain surgery and we have to do it on this day or else? Or can we postpone it a day? Or if we can't postpone it, who can step in that we may have to borrow from another team and support us during this time? It's like solutioning, right? So if
Yes.
our leaders and our managers are having difficulty with that, and that's not the expectation we have of them, then we've got a bigger problem than someone leaving to take care of their sick child, right? And so those are the kind of things, right? It's like putting humans first. How do you do it? Put humans first, put people first. And
Yes.
when you do that and people feel like they belong and that they want it and they're valued and the actions support the words, you will get discretionary effort. You will get the idea they had from company B that they used to work for 5 years ago that can help us save $100,000 right now. If you don't, you won't.
That's right. That's right. And it was great. I actually have it. I was going to ask you, I read somewhere from you that you said people are the heart of success. So I think this is exactly what you were talking about, I take it.
We say people are our most valued employees. I've heard that for 3 decades now. Did I feel it? Not all the time. But if you actually support that with your actions and behaviors and how you be as a company and as a leader, and people feel it, you get the fruits of that. It may
Yes.
not happen in 90 days. It may not happen next week. It may happen over the course of time, but retention will go up. They'll invite their talented friends who are looking for jobs to want to work for a company. You won't have to ask them because you've created the belonging, right? So it all starts with me with belonging. But we've been focusing on diversity and then diversity and inclusion, and then diversity, inclusion and equity, and DIEB now. We've had it backwards from my perspective for the whole time. You start with belonging, and
Hmm.
it's how do we create belonging for everybody? And the outcome of that is greater diversity, greater inclusion, and greater equity, because everyone has the sense that, oh, I belong at company X. I belong here. They value me. I'm going to bring my best. Not just the accounting work they're asking me to do or the coding work they're asking me to do. I'm going to bring my best because I have lived experience beyond just my title, my work, my job. And
Yes.
so that's the thing that I think we're looking for more with less. Part of the issue is we're not cultivating that by understanding who our people are and what they can bring and inviting that and celebrating that. It's all, well, you're outside the box from your performance review. We want to keep you inside the box. If you're outside the box, that's great that you're really skilled at that, but you're not going to get any credit for it. And it's like, well, maybe we need to think differently about that.
That's right. Absolutely. So I love that. And this resonates with me quite a bit because I've always been a proponent of, I've seen a lot of company values. Customers comes first. This comes first. The other comes first. I've always said people come first in any organization. What's your take on people that always put other things where none of that stuff can happen without your own people? You cannot put your customers first without taking care of your own people, because your people take care of those customers. Your people take care of safety. So what's your take on that, Brian?
But I think you just said it, right? So if your customers are first, okay, then what does that mean for your employees, right? So
Yes.
if your customers are first, are you
Yes.
trampling on your employees, making them work 120-hour weeks, and that's with no overtime, no bathroom, like whatever, like, or I believe that your employees are come first, right? What, like they're your team, like, so if your team doesn't come first, and not to say that the customers aren't important, that's not the message. The message is
Absolutely.
start with the people you hired to support you on the work you do and the
Yeah.
mission you have and the serving the customers. And then what is the expectation of that relationship? If you're being, if the conditions are created where the employees feel like they're valued, seen, heard, and their best, guess how they're going to show up with their customers? They're going to show up as their best version of themselves. If it's, and part of it I'll say is industrial aids conditioning, right? So it's always productionalized process. Customer comes first because we haven't valued traditionally people or humans first. So it's kind of like an unlearning process we have to go through at
Yes.
the macro level, right? It's back to the unlearning thing, and not everybody's in a different point in that journey. But I've always felt that way. I felt like out of place at points because I'm like, wait a minute, what about me? Not just me, but what about other people? And the other thing that's sort of related to this is um, how we look at a leader, what a leader looks like, right? And it's like, oh, we're lacking leadership. Yeah, we may be lacking leadership, but we're not lacking leaders. We're lacking our ability to see leaders that may not look like us. And so how do we change or go beyond our current perspective? I think something like this is even on my LinkedIn profile. It's, better lies beyond the lens that you're currently looking through, right? So it's like, maybe like it's not out there, that maybe the problem starts here, or the opportunity or the invitation starts here. And it gets back to that. It's like, wait a minute, why do I believe that it's okay to kind of focus on the customer customer's always right? Or a customer comes first. Because honestly, I've had situations where the customer wasn't right, or they were,
Yes.
and you can have a human conversation and adult conversation to get to what do we need to kind of work through here. But that just presumes that the other person's always right just because of the position they're in. And it's sort
Yes.
of like, well, that's just the same thing as if a leader's, just because they're the leader, they're the right person, right? So their perspective might be right. And it's like, no, why don't we value the people that are serving the customers? And if we do that right, the people that are serving the customers will do an excellent job, or the best job. If we don't value the people serving the customers, how's that going to help us best serve the customers?
That's right. And when you have that kind of mentality, Brian, you're gonna have certain customers that will crap all over your employees. And when you don't stand up for those employees and you just add on to that, how do you think that employee is gonna feel at the end of the day, where nobody's got their back, right? What are they doing there? Like, and that goes to the sense of belonging, right?
100%, 100%, right? So if you allow a customer to crap on your employee, my sense is they're probably not going to be there very long, because they're not going to feel like they belong. They're not going to feel valued,
Yes.
and they're going to say, "Yeah, you really do value the customer more. You don't
That's
value
right.
me, and
Yeah.
you pay me." So it's like, and you hired me, went through this whole process to hire me, and you still don't value it. And so they'll feel it. And that's the thing too, is before they say it, they'll feel it. And if they felt it, you're already in trouble in a sense, because your lived values are not conducive to creating the conditions for people to thrive, so your customers, your business can thrive. And so that's why it matters about belonging and feelings and all that kind of stuff. How people are feeling. Are you asking them, right?
Yeah.
What are you seeing that we can be doing differently? How are you feeling? Are you having regular conversations with your manager, your leadership team? How do and the other thing is prioritizing that. You could, I've been in situations where people are having one-on-ones. They're not always about you as the employee. They're typically, too often project-related meetings.
Yes.
And if you can't prioritize time with your employees, then it's back to that whole thing that the employees aren't your most valuable asset, and you don't prioritize them. You may not value them to the extent that would be healthier. And so that becomes the thing, right? If you're not connected to your employees and understand them beyond what you're asking them to do, it's short-sighted, right? And
Yeah.
it's short-sighted for the transactional, productionalized. Do what you get. Just stay in your lane and do what you need to do. Don't think outside the box. Don't bring any of your prior experience, even though we might be able to use that and actually save money or make money differently or create innovation. And it comes down to fear-based mentality and being comfortable with what you're comfortable with and uncomfortable with uncertainty. There's risk involved
Yes.
with newness, right? Well, what if that the issue isn't with the employee, it's with the leader's unhealthy relationship with uncertainty and fear and things they don't know, which gets into the diversity, equity, belonging, and that conversation, and then promotion cycles and all that kind of stuff. And are we hiring people for uh, their talent and their expertise, or there's all these kind of related questions in terms of practices, and that's how you get to a culture of growth, is hiring all these practices align with the values, and people feel it and they celebrate it. And the thing is, these values, don't ask the people that make them, ask the people that live them. What are
That's
the
right.
values of company X, right? Well, they'll tell you. The customers will, if we're performing well, they'll tell us, oh, they value, this is what their values are. The employees will too. And do you want that to be what you want to hear, or do you want that to be what reality is? And maybe they're the same thing, which would be a good thing. If they're not the same thing, you might have a problem.
Exactly. Exactly. And I always challenge people to ask them this question. So there's certain companies, you can be a monopoly, you can have, a good bottom line. Imagine if you actually created an engaging environment and took care of your people. Imagine what would happen to your bottom line then,
Mhm.
right?
And you just made me think of something too. And this is part of the sort of the dynamic of you get asked for an interview and feeling like it's a privilege to be asked for an interview, instead of, no, you're bringing something to help them to the table,
Yes.
equal
Yes.
footing, and the mindset there. So part of it, and this is part of the work too with them that I do with people, is you're not like you know below the employer in this conversation of the hiring process. It's a even playing field, and from a standpoint of, you matter. You're bringing valuable resources to bear to support the organization's growth and ability to serve their customers. But the mindset and the conditioning and such is, oh, I got the interview, I'm so scared about the interview process. It's
Yes.
beautiful. I've been there, and it's
Yep.
like, no judgment about that, but it's like, wait a minute, no. What do you need to know from the customer? What do you need to know from the employer about their conditions, right? What am I working into?
Yes.
And ask them the questions you need to find out, which may be tough questions. Great. They're asking you questions they need on your end. Ask them about the environment. Ask them about situations that may have come up previously that were handled in ways that you didn't like. Like, you had to leave to go take care for a sick child at the end of a project, and you were blacklisted for it, or whatever happened for that. Those
Yes.
kind of things. You have, and I don't like the term power in this regard, but you have more influence and more to bring to the table,
Value.
and you might think. Value, absolutely. And step into it, embrace it, right? And think about, and it's really about, you're interviewing them, right? It's interesting now with all the coaching vacancies in the NFL. They're like, oh, Bill Belichick's interviewing the Falcons. I'm like, every one of those coaches should be interviewing that, because just because they won an NFL coaching job, there's only 32 of them on the planet, doesn't mean they're just going to accept. Because guess what? We've seen it. They'll be out in a year or two if it's not the right environment. But it's the same kind of thought processes. Any interview process that you're in, that you're going to accept employment for. Yes, you want the money, you need the money. It's, you want to be responsible with your decision making there. But part of that responsibility is owning the value you bring, and kind of bringing that to the table and being confident with that, which is an opportunity for many folks.
And I think the way people see that, Brian, is, well, the employer's giving me this salary or this amount of money, so they kind of I owe it to them or whatever. They owe me. They own me. But the reality is, there's an exchange that they're paying you that salary for the experience and the value that you're bringing into the organization to help them with their bottom line. Everybody in that company helps with the bottom line. Just because you're at one level or the other, everybody is included in that bottom line. Without them, there is no bottom line, right? So
Yeah, and the thing that you just helped me think about too is, you know, interview processes where people want to get to how much you want to make, right? Asking you what your number is. I'm like, we haven't even talked about your work environment yet. We haven't talked about
yes,
X, Y, like, and so that actually is a tell for me about where they are from a mindset perspective. The company, about if they're worried that much about the number, they're looking to replace. They're not looking to bring in a new teammate. So it's like, I lost A, I'm going to go get another A. Like I lost a pitcher on baseball team, I'm going to go get another pitcher. Instead, wait a minute, we've got an excess of pitching on the team. Let's go get a right fielder because we need somebody that can play right field.
That's
And
right.
it's like same kind of thing. It's like, well, can we talk a little bit more about the work experience and what will it be like for me to work on the team? How often do we engage in activities that in one-on-ones or meetings that are, or do we prioritize meetings that help the managers and their employees connect and build that kind of sustainable infrastructure of connection? And that's where growth happens, right? And
Yes.
we don't like it because it takes longer, right? 90-day cycles, productivity, give me the numbers. That could lead to 100% more, 100% better results over 3 years. We're just so impatient with the short-term mindset. If we took the long-term perspective, there's where the invitation and opportunity is. And I hear people talk about it, all the time. Gary Vaynerchuk being one of them, about we got to play the long game. You better believe it, right? And so that's where the opportunity is. But our conditioning is short-term, 90-day cycles. Oh, what are earnings going to look like? And every decision, whether stated or unstated, becomes about that, right? And so, what if we had a more expansive mindset?
Yeah.
And but what would that mean for development, leadership development, personal development, prioritizing times for connection and one-on-one? And what do we need to defer that isn't really as urgent as we think it is, but we can still do? We just have to defer it a little bit so we can carve out the time to do this really important stuff.
That's
like
right.
Connecting with our people.
That's right. And sometimes, you do have to do what you said, is unlearn, learn, unlearn, learn. You learn from those failures and mistakes, and that's part of the growing process. But people, like you said, that short-term mindset, I love that. That's the issue. So before I wrap it up, Brian, I've got a few questions that I'd like to ask you. One is, what would your message and advice be to young people trying to get into their first leadership role?
In your first leadership role. So why are you looking to get into a leadership role? So the awareness of why is that? Is it just like, oh, I've been working for X amount of years, the next step is into leadership? Or do you really want a leadership role? Because you could sort of be a leader by being a tech lead, by in your area of competence, or you can be like a people manager. Do you want to manage? What kind of a leader do you want to be? You want to be a people manager? Do you want to be someone that is interfacing as the lead of a technical competence group, that you're working with folks because of your high level expertise? So my first question is, why do you want to become a leader? Why do you want to get into leadership? Right. And so, and your awareness of that tells me like maybe a little bit about readiness, or directionally where you might want to go, and what's important about that to you. Does it, is it something that matters to you, and does it align with your skill sets? Show me, like, in another aspect of your life, volunteering, being on the sports team, those kind of things. Like for me, I was a leader on the field in sports, so like leadership, it's just like I'd practice without having a title, right? You just step into it, and you kind of, I'm here with my teammates on the soccer field, and I'm just going to lead, right, from where I am, be a leader from where I am. So are you currently being a leader from where you are becomes another question. Better than that is, how are you doing? How are you being a leader in your role right now? And if they can give examples about that, great, because the examples might tell me, oh, this is sort of the direction they want to go. Because wanting to go there is the difference between interested and committed to, right? We may have had that conversation in our offline conversation, and a lot of people are interested in leadership until they figure out what's involved with it, right? And so if they're demonstrating leadership in their current role, it gives me a sense that they have some interest in doing it, or some capability, or some natural energy towards doing that. And so those are the kind of things. So show me something that says, not only do I want to do this, but I think this is a next evolution for me in terms of my career, and I can bring value there. And this is what that looks like.
That's right. Awesome. Thank you, Brian. What is your unconventional definition of leadership?
My unconventional definition of leadership. Leadership is observation, listening, and creating the conditions for people to thrive. so your business can. It comes back to the creating the conditions, right? And so leaders are listeners first, they're learners, and they create the conditions, and they demonstrate and model the behaviors themselves as sort of like the mirror of what is expected. And it's not a page on the wall. It's, you see it every day, and how they, and you can hear it in their tone, in their language, in their relationships and conversations. And so, but listeners and learners, I think, is the starting point. Curiosity, and then creating those conditions, and then modeling them. It's that action of and behavior of modeling and saying, not only verbally, this is what it is, but this is what it looks like, and we
That's
need
right.
more of it. Come help us. We need more of it. That kind of thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And can you share with the folks out there, where can they find Brian Kelly?
The best places would be LinkedIn, Brian Kelly, or Human Factors Consulting. I've got a page there, or my humanfactorsconsulting.net, my website. Either one of those places are great to connect with me. And I'd love to connect with you folks.
Excellent. And if you've got any questions for Brian, you can always comment below when we post this up, and I'll make sure that Brian gets it, and he'll provide you guys with the answers. Again, I wanted to take time out to say thank you, Brian, for being with us today and sharing your experience and knowledge and your great stories with everyone. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and hope to see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Take care.